Stop sleeping on your potential. The world does not reward those who wait for perfect conditions. It rewards those who act while conditions are imperfect. Every hour you delay, your dream grows weaker and your excuses grow stronger. Opportunity is never loud. It whispers to the alert and passes silently by the careless. Desire is the first movement of the mind toward achievement. Before any visible action takes place, before any plan is formed, before any effort is applied, a strong inner wanting must exist. People often mistake wishes for desire, but a wish is passive while desire is active. A wish waits for circumstances to change, but desire commands the mind to change circumstances. The moment a person knows exactly what they want, their thoughts begin to organize themselves around that purpose, and their behavior slowly aligns with it. A weak desire produces weak results because it lacks urgency. When a person only half wants success, they accept excuses easily. They delay action, tolerate doubt, and surrender when obstacles appear. Strong desire does not negotiate with difficulty. It treats resistance as a signal to increase effort rather than reduce it. The individual with burning desire does not ask whether they will succeed. They ask how long it will take. This kind of desire transforms ordinary effort into persistent action. Desire gives direction to the mind. Without it, the mind drifts from one idea to another without purpose. Drift creates confusion, and confusion leads to inactivity. When desire is clearly defined, the mind becomes focused. It begins to filter opportunities, recognize useful information, and ignore distractions. Two people can live in the same environment and face the same conditions, yet only one advances because only one is driven by a definite aim. The difference is not in resources, but in intensity of purpose. Every major achievement in history began with a definite desire. It did not begin with money, education, or influence. It began with an idea held firmly and emotionally in the mind. Desire supplies the emotional fuel that logic alone cannot provide. Logic explains what should be done, but desire pushes the person to do it even when logic warns of risk. When desire is strong, effort becomes natural. Work is no longer forced. It becomes an expression of inner purpose. Desire must be backed by belief to be effective. A person may want success, but if they secretly believe they are unworthy or incapable, their desire weakens. The mind cannot move confidently toward a goal it does not believe is possible. This is why repeated thoughts of doubt quietly destroy ambition. On the other hand, repeated thoughts of confidence strengthen desire. When a person speaks of their goal daily, visualizes it, and treats it as real, the mind accepts it as a direction rather than a dream. Desire also determines endurance. Temporary excitement fades quickly, but true desire remains steady. It survives disappointment and grows stronger under pressure. Those who succeed are not free from failure. They simply refuse to stop because their desire is greater than their fear. When rejection appears, desire interprets it as feedback. When delay occurs, desire uses the time to prepare. When defeat threatens, desire reshapes the plan instead of abandoning the purpose. The strength of desire can be measured by the sacrifices one is willing to make. Comfort is the first thing desire challenges. Strong desire demands discipline, patience, and self-control. It refuses to accept immediate pleasure in exchange for long-term loss. It trains the mind to choose growth over ease and purpose over convenience. Where there is no sacrifice, desire remains shallow. Where there is sacrifice, desire becomes a driving force. Desire alone is not enough, but without it, nothing meaningful begins. It is the spark that ignites the will. It creates hunger for knowledge, courage for risk, and energy for action. The mind responds to the strongest emotion it holds, and when desire becomes that emotion, the entire personality moves in one direction. A person who carries clear and powerful desire does not wander aimlessly through life. They walk with intention, think with purpose, and act with expectation, guided by an inner demand that refuses to be ignored. shaping decisions, habits, and attitudes according to a vision that exists first in thought and then in behavior. Drifting is the condition of the mind when it moves without purpose and accepts whatever life offers without resistance. It is not caused by laziness alone, but by the absence of a clear aim. A person who drifts does not consciously choose failure, yet failure becomes the natural result of their habits. They wake up each day reacting to events instead of directing them. Their time is spent responding to urgency rather than building importance. Without a defined direction, effort scatters and energy dissolves into routine. Procrastination is the daily companion of drifting. It disguises itself as patience, preparation, or waiting for the right moment. In reality, it is the fear of decision wearing the mask of reason. When a task feels uncomfortable or uncertain, the drifting mind delays it. Delay becomes habit, and habit becomes character. What begins as postponing a single action soon turns into postponing responsibility itself. The longer a person waits, the heavier the task feels, and the more powerful the excuse becomes. Drifting thrives on comfort. It prefers familiar problems over unfamiliar opportunities. It convinces the mind that tomorrow will be better suited for effort than today. This belief quietly robs a person of urgency. Days blend into weeks, and weeks into years, while potential remains unused. Many people mistake activity for progress. They remain busy but unproductive, occupied but not advancing. Motion without direction gives the illusion of movement while keeping the person in the same place. Procrastination feeds on fear. Fear of failure, fear of criticism, and fear of change all support delay. The mind protects itself by avoiding situations that threaten its current identity. To attempt something greater would require admitting that the present level is not enough. This admission feels dangerous to the ego, so the mind chooses postponement instead of transformation. Each delayed decision strengthens the belief that action is optional, weakening the will with every repetition. Drifting also depends on the influence of the crowd. When a person has no aim of their own, they borrow the opinions and behaviors of others. They move in the direction of least resistance, following routines designed by circumstances, rather than choices designed by purpose. This creates a life shaped by accident instead of intention. The individual becomes controlled by schedules, demands, and habits that were never consciously selected. Over time, they lose the ability to decide quickly and confidently. The greatest danger of drifting is that it feels safe. There is no immediate pain in postponing a goal, no instant punishment for indecision. The cost appears slowly, hidden in lost chances and reduced self-respect. Confidence fades when promises to oneself are repeatedly broken. Each unfinished task becomes evidence of inability in the mind. Gradually, expectation lowers and ambition shrinks. What once seemed possible begins to feel unrealistic, not because it truly is, but because action was never taken. Procrastination weakens discipline by training the mind to obey impulse instead of intention. When comfort is chosen over effort, the mind learns to avoid strain. This habit spreads into every area of life, affecting work, relationships, and personal growth. The person begins to settle for partial results and temporary relief instead of lasting achievement. They exchange long-term vision for short-term ease and call it balance. Drifting can only survive where there is no clear desire. The moment a person defines what they want, drifting becomes uncomfortable. Procrastination loses its excuse when purpose becomes urgent. A definite aim gives the mind something to protect and pursue. Without it, the mind protects only its comfort. The transition from drifting to directing begins with a single decision that time will no longer be wasted. That decision challenges fear, interrupts habit, and forces the mind to confront responsibility. When action replaces delay, self-true, ST begins to rebuild and momentum slowly forms. The habit of postponement weakens when the habit of execution strengthens, and the mind learns to associate effort with progress instead of pain, shifting from passive waiting to deliberate movement, turning ordinary days into steps toward a chosen future rather than shadows of yesterday's hesitation. Discipline is the bridge between intention and result, and daily habits are the stones that form that bridge. A person does not rise to greatness in a single moment of effort, but through repeated actions that seem small at first. Habits are the language the mind speaks fluently. What is practiced daily becomes natural, and what becomes natural shapes destiny. When effort is inconsistent, results are unpredictable. When effort is disciplined, results become inevitable. The power of habit lies in its quiet influence. It does not announce its importance, yet it controls behavior more strongly than emotion or motivation. Motivation rises and falls, but habit remains steady. A disciplined habit removes the need for constant decision-making. It turns action into routine and routine into character. The person who depends on feeling inspired will act only when conditions are favorable. The person who depends on habit will act even when conditions are uncomfortable. Small actions repeated daily carry more power than large actions performed occasionally. 1 hour of focused effort each day builds more strength than 10 hours of scattered effort once a month. The mind accepts repetition as truth. When discipline is practiced daily, the mind begins to identify with effort and responsibility. It no longer resists work because work becomes art of identity. This is how ordinary people produce extraordinary outcomes without extraordinary talent. Discipline trains the will to lead instead of follow. Most people live according to impulse, moving toward pleasure and away from discomfort. Discipline reverses this pattern by teaching the mind to choose long-term benefit over short-term ease. Each time a person keeps a promise to themselves, their self-respect grows. Each time they break it, their confidence weakens. Habits either build or destroy trust within the mind. When discipline becomes a daily practice, self-trust strengthens and stronger goals become believable. Daily habits also control the direction of thought. A person who begins the day with purpose programs the mind for productivity. A person who begins the day with distraction trains the mind for waste. Thought follows action as much as action follows thought. When disciplined routines are established, they shape thinking patterns. The mind learns to expect effort, focus, and progress. This expectation reduces internal resistance and increases emotional stability. Discipline creates momentum. The hardest part of any task is the beginning. Once movement starts, continuation becomes easier. A daily habit removes the barrier of starting because the action is no longer new. It becomes familiar. Familiar actions require less mental energy, allowing the person to direct more energy toward improvement. Progress then becomes cumulative. Each day adds a layer of skill, strength, or knowledge to the previous day's effort. Habits also determine standards. What a person tolerates daily becomes their normal. When low standards are repeated, mediocrity becomes company. Mortable. When high standards are practiced, excellence becomes natural. Discipline does not demand perfection, it demands consistency. A small step taken daily reshapes ability more effectively than a perfect plan never followed. The habit of doing something daily trains the mind to value process over excuses. The disciplined person does not wait for ideal conditions. They create useful conditions through routine. Weather, mood, and opinion lose their controlling power when action is scheduled and respected. This builds independence from circumstance. The person becomes guided by principle instead of feeling. Over time, this creates emotional strength and mental clarity. Problems are approached with structure rather than panic because the habit of order has replaced the habit of reaction. Daily discipline also sharpens awareness. When behavior is intentional, results can be measured and adjusted. The mind learns to observe what works and what does not. This awareness allows improvement without confusion. Without habit, effort is random and results are unclear. With habit, cause and effect become visible. The person gains control over their progress instead of guessing at it. The future is shaped by what is done repeatedly in the present. Each habit is a vote for the type of person one is becoming. The mind records these votes and builds identity from them. A person who practices discipline daily becomes someone who expects growth, accepts effort, and trusts their own ability to move forward, forming a life directed by intention rather than chance, sustained by actions too small to be dramatic, yet too powerful to be ignored. carried forward by routine that turns effort. NTO, character and purpose into behavior. The mind is the command center of human behavior, and whatever is repeatedly impressed upon it becomes the pattern of action. Thought is the beginning of every experience, whether of success or failure. A person does not move in the direction of circumstances, but in the direction of dominant ideas. When thoughts are careless, results are confused. When thoughts are ordered, results become intentional. The mind accepts what it hears most often and what it sees most clearly. For this reason, repeated thinking becomes belief, and belief becomes behavior. Belief is not something a person is born with in fixed measure. It is formed through suggestion, repetition, and emotion. When a person constantly hears that they are weak, limited, or unlucky, the mind absorbs this as instruction. The subconscious does not argue, it obeys. It turns these ideas into habits of action and reaction. On the other hand, when a person fills the mind with thoughts of ability, growth, and possibility, the same subconscious builds behavior that supports those ideas. The difference between confidence and doubt is not talent, but mental training. Thought controls perception. Two people can face the same challenge, yet one sees a barrier while the other sees a lesson. This difference comes from belief. A mind trained to expect defeat will interpret every difficulty as proof of limitation. A mind trained to expect progress will interpret difficulty as preparation. Events do not carry meaning by themselves. Meaning is assigned by the thinking process. When belief is strong, circumstances lose their power to discourage. When belief is weak, even small problems feel overwhelming. The mind is shaped by the company it keeps, the words it hears, and the images it entertains. Ideas borrowed from others become personal convictions when accepted without question. This is why uncontrolled influence is dangerous. A person who allows negative opinions to dominate their thinking slowly adopts the identity those opinions describe. Control of thought requires conscious selection of what is allowed to enter the mental environment. The mind must be guarded as carefully as the body because it feeds on mental material just as the body feeds on physical food. Belief determines effort. A person will not persist in a goal they secretly believe is impossible. They may speak of desire, but their actions will reveal their true conviction. Effort follows belief naturally. When belief is present, persistence feels reasonable. When belief is absent, effort feels forced. This is why affirming an idea once is not enough. The mind must be repeatedly reminded of the chosen direction until it accepts it as fact. Repetition turns suggestion into certainty. Thought also controls emotion. Fear is a product of imagined loss. Courage is a product of imagined gain. Both are born in the mind before they appear in action. When the mind is trained to picture success, emotion supports movement. When the mind is trained to picture failure, emotion supports retreat. Emotional control is therefore not achieved by suppressing feeling, but by guiding thought. The emotion that dominates is the emotion that matches the strongest mental picture. Belief creates expectation, and expectation influences behavior. A person who expects rejection will speak hesitantly and act cautiously. A person who expects acceptance will speak firmly and act confidently. Others respond to this inner state even when it is not spoken. The world often reflects back the attitude projected toward it. This is not chance but psychological influence. The mind signals its belief through posture, tone, and decision-making, and these signals shape outcomes. The mind must be directed deliberately, or it will be directed by habit and environment. Habitual thinking is easier than intentional thinking, but it rarely produces improvement. To control the mind is to choose the thoughts that will be allowed to grow. Each chosen thought becomes a seed. Each repeated thought becomes a root. Each rooted thought becomes a belief. Belief then becomes a command that guides behavior without constant awareness. When belief changes, identity changes. A person who once saw themselves as powerless begins to act with initiative when their belief shifts. This change does not come from external reward, but from internal acceptance. The mind no longer waits for permission. It moves according to its own conviction. Thought becomes the architect, belief becomes the builder, and action becomes the visible structure of inner direction, shaping decisions, reactions, and ambitions through ideas held long enough to become instructions for life. Decision is the moment when thought turns into direction. Until a decision is made, the mind remains divided between desire and doubt. This division weakens effort because energy is scattered between opposing ideas. Fear thrives in this space of uncertainty. It feeds on hesitation and grows stronger with every delay. The person who refuses to decide gives fear permission to control their movement. The person who decides takes that permission away and replaces it with purpose. Fear is not proof of danger, it is proof of unfamiliarity. The mind resists what it has not yet mastered. New goals threaten old identities, and fear rises to protect what is known. It does not ask whether the new direction is better, it only asks whether it is safe. Safety in this sense means sameness. This is why fear often appears strongest just before progress. It is the final argument of comfort against change. Indecision magnifies fear by allowing imagination to create worst-case scenarios. The longer a person waits, the more space fear has to invent reasons for inaction. Doubt becomes sophisticated. It uses logic to justify delay and caution to disguise avoidance. The mind begins to believe that waiting is wisdom, when in reality it is surrender. Each moment of hesitation trains the mind to retreat rather than advance. Decision interrupts this pattern. The instant a person commits to a course of action, fear loses its advantage. It no longer controls the question of whether to move, only how the movement will feel. Fear cannot stop action once action becomes a choice rather than a suggestion. The mind accepts the decision as instruction and begins to search for ways to support it. Energy that was once spent on doubt is redirected toward problem solving. Action is the natural companion of decision. A decision without action is only a thought with authority but no body. When action follows decision, confidence begins to grow. Confidence is not the absence of fear, it is the presence of movement despite fear. Each step taken weakens fear's voice and strengthens belief in personal ability. The mind learns from experience more than from theory. What once seemed impossible becomes manageable once it is attempted. Fear depends on the future. It warns of outcomes that have not happened and may never happen. Action brings attention back to the present. In the present, fear has less power because the mind is occupied with what must be done rather than what might go wrong. Work replaces worry. Effort replaces imagination. Reality replaces speculation. This shift is not emotional, it is practical. The mind cannot fully fear and fully act at the same time. Decision also creates identity. A person becomes what they repeatedly choose. When they choose to act, they become someone who acts. When they choose to delay, they become someone who waits. Identity is not declared, it is practiced. The habit of decision builds the habit of leadership over one's own life. The habit of indecision builds the habit of dependency on circumstance. Fear loses strength when it is faced repeatedly. Each encounter reduces its mystery. What was once imagined as overwhelming is revealed as manageable. The mind records these encounters as evidence of ability. This evidence forms a new belief, that effort produces results. Belief in effort is more powerful than belief in luck because it gives control to the individual. Control reduces fear because it replaces helplessness with responsibility. Decision does not require certainty. It requires direction. A person does not need to know every step, they need to choose a step. Movement clarifies what thinking alone cannot. Paths reveal themselves through progress, not before it. Fear demands complete safety before movement. Growth requires movement before safety. This difference separates those who remain in preparation from those who enter experience. The mind respects boldness because boldness simplifies conflict. When a goal is chosen firmly, internal debate ends. Energy that was once wasted on arguing with oneself becomes available for execution. This creates a sense of inner order. Order creates calm. Calm supports focus. Focus improves results. The cycle of decision and action builds its own reinforcement. Each successful effort encourages the next, and momentum begins to replace resistance. Fear survives where choice is postponed. It fades where choice is exercised. The person who waits for fear to disappear before acting will wait indefinitely. The person who acts while fear is present discovers that fear weakens in the presence of courage, that doubt shrinks when effort expands, that uncertainty loses influence when direction is declared, and that the mind becomes obedient when it is given a clear command through deliberate movement rather than endless consideration.